Before we get into this, let me give you context. I'm first generation Australian, Mauritian heritage, mixed race. So when I talk about racism or social justice, it's not abstract for me. It's not academic sport. I grew up hearing both sides. One side says the system is stacked. The other says hard work fixes everything. Somewhere in between, real life actually happens. And I've always been fascinated by this question: how much of inequality is injustice and how much of it is something else? Because if you grow up mixed race, you don't fit neatly into the narrative. You're not purely oppressor. You're not purely oppressed. You're just navigating systems like everyone else. And over time, I realized something uncomfortable. A lot of modern social justice thinking starts from a conclusion. If outcomes aren't equal, discrimination must be the cause. But once you lock that in as the default explanation, you stop looking at data. You stop looking at incentives. You stop looking at history, culture, geography, family structure, behavior patterns. And that's where Sowell's work grabbed me. He's not dismissing racism. He's asking a harder question. What if inequality has more variables than we're willing to admit? Because if you misdiagnose the cause, your solution can make things worse. And as someone who cares about this personally, not politically, that matters to me. This isn't about winning an argument. It's about asking whether we're analysing reality or reacting emotionally to disparity. And that distinction changes everything. Here's where things get uncomfortable. At the heart of modern social justice thinking is an assumption. In a fair world, outcomes would be roughly equal. Not identical, but broadly similar. So if they're not similar, something unjust must have distorted them. That sounds reasonable. Until you test it. Because Sowell draws the distinction most people skip over. He calls it the difference between social justice and what he labels cosmic justice. Cosmic justice assumes the universe owes us symmetry. But the universe has never been symmetrical. Let's step outside race for a second. Geography alone destroys the equal starting line idea. Europe has thousands of natural harbours. Africa has far fewer. In the ancient world, shipping goods 2,000 miles by water was cheaper than moving them 75 miles inland. That shaped trade. Trade shaped cities. Cities shaped institutions. Institutions shaped wealth. Or take age. Japanese Americans have a median age in the 50s. Mexican Americans have a median age in the 20s. Middle-aged people earn more than people just entering the workforce. If incomes differ between those groups, is that injustice? Or life cycle economics? Or take family structure. Black married couple poverty rates in the US have consistently been below the national average for decades. White single-parent households have poverty rates more than double that. Same country, same system, different structure. If racism were the sole driver, that pattern shouldn't exist. This is the point. When you assume disparity equals injustice, you ignore how many variables shape outcomes. Geography, age distribution, family structure, education choices, cultural norms, incentives, random historical events. Nature is not egalitarian. History is not evenly distributed. Luck is not moral. We cannot demand justice from the cosmos. And if we start policy from the assumption that inequality itself is proof of wrongdoing, we risk solving the wrong problem. For me personally, growing up mixed race, this was the turning point. I realised something. If I blame every unequal outcome on injustice, I remove my own agency. And if society does that at scale, we create permanent grievance instead of durable progress. That's the core conflict. Not left versus right, not compassion versus cruelty. It's this. Are unequal outcomes automatically evidence of injustice? Or are they often the predictable result of unequal variables? And that question sets up everything that follows. Before we even talk about racism, capitalism, colonialism, zoom out. Look at a map. Europe's coastline is deeply indented, natural harbours everywhere. Africa's coastline is comparatively smooth. That one geographic difference mattered enormously. In the ancient world, transporting goods by water was exponentially cheaper than by land. It was cheaper to ship cargo 2,000 miles across the Mediterranean than move it 75 miles inland. That isn't policy. That's physics. If your civilization grows around navigable waterways, you trade more. You exchange ideas faster. You urbanize earlier. You compound wealth sooner. If you're landlocked or inland, your costs are higher, your networks are thinner, your scale is smaller. And this isn't about race. It's about starting conditions. Africa is larger than Europe, more than twice the landmass, but Europe has far more usable ports relative to its size. That shaped maritime trade dominance. Maritime trade shaped capital accumulation, capital shaped industrialization. Add climate. Temperate zones historically produce more agricultural surplus than tropical regions. Agricultural surplus feeds cities. Cities produce innovation. Now ask yourself, if two continents evolve for thousands of years under different geographic constraints, should we expect equal economic outcomes? Or take something more specific. The Western Hemisphere had almost no large domesticated draft animals before Europeans arrived. No horses, no oxen, no camels. That limits overland trade. That limits scale. That limits integration of knowledge. Eurasia had a connected landmass spanning 10,000 kilometres. Ideas, animals, technology, diseases all spread across it. The Americas were geographically fragmented. That's not injustice. That's continental layout. This is what Sowell means when he says nature is not egalitarian. The world has never been a level playing field. So when we look at modern disparities and immediately assume moral failure, we're skipping thousands of years of accumulated geographic influence. And this matters to me personally. As someone from a small island nation, Mauritius, I know geography shapes destiny. Island economies are constrained differently. Colonial trade routes matter. Access to markets matters. You don't start from the same place. Equal potential does not mean equal developed capability. And if we don't understand that distinction, every outcome looks like oppression. Next slide, we move from geography to demographics, because even inside the same country, age alone can manufacture inequality. Ready? Here's something almost no one talks about when comparing groups. Age. Not ideology. Not discrimination. Age distribution. In the United States, Japanese Americans have had a median age in the 50s. Mexican Americans have had a median age in the 20s. That's a generational gap. Now think about earning curves. Most people peak financially in their 40s and 50s. Your 20s are for entry-level roles, building skills, paying off debt. So if one group has a median age of 52 and another 28, and you compare average income, what exactly are you measuring? Justice? Or life cycle economics? The same logic applies globally. Countries like Germany, Italy, and Japan have median ages over 40. Countries like Nigeria or Afghanistan have median ages under 20. If half your population is teenagers, your national income per capita will look very different than a country where half the population is middle-aged professionals. That doesn't mean one group is smarter, or more oppressed, or more virtuous. It means the demographic pyramid matters. And we do this mistake constantly. We compare groups as if they're interchangeable units, but they're not interchangeable. They differ in age, education fields, family structure, migration history, occupational concentration. And then we look at income gaps and say, see, injustice. Maybe. Or maybe we're comparing apples to oranges and pretending they're identical fruit. This hits home for me personally. As a first-generation Australian from Mauritian heritage, I've seen how migration waves change age profiles. Immigrant groups often arrive young. They cluster in particular industries. They sacrifice early earnings to build long-term stability. If you freeze frame that in year 5 and say they're behind, you miss the trajectory. This is why Sowell pushes hard on the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. Equal opportunity means rules apply equally. Equal outcome assumes life stages don't matter. They do, and ignoring them doesn't produce fairness. It produces bad analysis. There's an assumption floating around that if groups were truly equal, you'd see roughly equal representation across industries. If you don't, discrimination must be operating. But here's the problem. Skills aren't randomly generated every generation. They compound over centuries. Take something simple, beer. Most of the major beer brands in the United States were founded by people of German ancestry. Germany has been brewing beer since the Roman Empire. That's 500 plus years of accumulated knowledge. Techniques get refined. Standards get embedded. Cultural identity forms around the craft. That's not genetic superiority. That's historical specialization. The same pattern shows up everywhere. The Chinese minority in Malaysia historically dominated engineering and commerce. Lebanese communities have dominated trade networks in parts of West Africa. Indians in East Africa. Jews in finance across Europe. Scots in whiskey production. Italians in cuisine. This isn't random. When a group concentrates in an industry for generations, it builds. to informal apprenticeship network, cultural familiarity with the craft, risk tolerance in that field, a community capital. That produces overrepresentation. And here's the kicker. If success clustering were purely about oppression, you'd expect dominant majorities to always outperform minorities. But history shows countless examples of minorities economically outperforming the ruling majority in various societies. So now you've got a choice. Either believe discrimination magically works in opposite directions across different countries, or accept that historical concentration, networks, and culture matter. This resonates with me personally. Mauritius is a multi-ethnic society. Different communities historically specialised in different trades, agriculture, business, civil service. Those patterns didn't emerge from abstract equality. They emerged from colonial structures, migration timing, and cultural capital. You inherit ecosystems, and ecosystems compound. So when people say, why aren't outcomes equal across every sector? The better question is, why would they be? Equal potential does not erase historical accumulation. And if we ignore that, we end up assuming malice, where momentum might explain more. If the system is the primary driver of outcomes, then people operating inside the same system should perform roughly the same, right? Same laws, same funding formulas, same labour market, same institutions. But reality doesn't cooperate. In New York City, there have been cases where charter schools and traditional public schools operate in the same building, same postcode, same neighbourhood, same demographic mix, yet the charter school students hit proficiency in maths at dramatically higher rates. Same system, different results. If the explanation is purely systemic oppression, that gap shouldn't exist inside the same building. And this isn't about race denial. This is about causation. Let's go further. In Chicago in the 1930s, delinquency rates among black neighbourhoods ranged from over 40% in some areas to under 2% in others. Same city, same era, same broader racial context. Huge variation. That tells you something. It tells you behaviour, norms, local culture, and internal structure matter. And once you admit that, the conversation shifts from who's to blame to what actually drives outcomes. This is important for me personally. As someone mixed race, I grew up hearing that systems explain everything. But if systems explain everything, how do you account for massive variation within the same group? Why do some immigrant communities explode economically within one generation while others stagnate under identical legal conditions? The systemic story might explain part of the picture, but it doesn't explain internal divergence. And if you ignore internal variation, you lock entire groups into permanent victimhood narratives. That's dangerous because it removes agency, and once agency disappears, progress slows.